in Corvallis, Oregon, which is the occupied traditional territories of the Kalapuya people. I came, specifically to camp because I have been friends with Winona for like 10, 11 years and worked with her on fossil fuel campaigns for 10, 11 years, mostly tar sands, like Line 3. And I serve on the Honor the Earth Board of Directors. And I was just really hoping that this project would not get this far, and I'm really kind of amazed that it has. But when it got to this point and they're going under the rivers, I really felt like I didn't have any choice at all except to come out and be with my friend and, be a water actively protect the water at the front lines. But I have a ton of background in fighting fossil fuel infrastructure projects, and I've been familiar with Line 3 and since it was first proposed 7 years ago. As an engineer and having spent 10, 11 years fighting fossil fuel infrastructure projects all over the U.S. and Canada, is that the fossil fuel industry does not believe that the rules apply to them. The rules that apply to everybody else, they are exempt from. And they use the corrupting influence of money in politics to game the system, to get around the rules whenever and wherever they can. I spent 3 years directly involved in a campaign in Oregon fighting a frack gas pipeline and LNG terminal that was proposed. And it is essentially dead in the water at this point. They haven't canceled the project, but they've debooked it, which is the next best thing. They were not able to get their permits in Oregon, and that's why they've debooked it. They most probably critically, they were not able to get the clean water permits that they need. You fall into these jurisdictions of what's federal versus what's state, and because it was a gas pipeline, it was largely under federal jurisdiction, and this was actually rejected under the Obama administration, and they came back pretty much the day after, not quite the day after Trump got elected, but very shortly after. Let me put it this way. We were not optimistic that we would get a fair process under Trump, right? It's not about us influencing it. It's just about it being fair, because Obama said no. The FERC under the Obama administration, which is an independent agency, I can't say Obama said no. FERC under the Obama administration said no. They came around and so we really focused on the state permitting process. The state didn't have a huge amount of jurisdiction, but there were a few key permits that were state and local that we could really focus on. And of those, the most critical was the Clean Water permit. Clean Water Act is a federal law. However, implementation of the Clean Water Act has been delegated to the states, which makes sense because what you want to do for clean water in Florida is not going to be the same as what you want to do in Minnesota versus what you want to do in Washington State versus Arizona, right? I mean, there's all these different climates and all different types of water ecosystems, so having one-size-fits-all federal regulations makes no sense. So each state develops their set of clean water rules that suits their specific ecological conditions. And a big part of clean water regulations in Oregon is protection of the salmon populations because they're hurting so bad. The bottom line was that the Oregon government held the fossil fuel industry to the same standards that they hold everybody else. And I know this because I work as an engineer in Oregon and I know what those standards are, right? I know what it means to get a DEQ water quality permit, right? And so they weren't able to build it. I, quite frankly, was shocked that the state of Minnesota issued a clean water permit for this pipeline because I don't see how they could cross 22 rivers without degrading the water quality when they couldn't build a pipeline through Oregon without degrading the water quality, right? I mean, this is every bit as fragile, it's not mountainous the way Oregon is because they were trying to go across a mountain range, but even still, right? And we found out, oh, hey, look, They can't build it without degrading water quality because they had frack outs and dumped poison in the water. That
Right.
when the fossil fuel industry is required to play by the same rules as everybody else, and by everybody else I mean everybody from agriculture to mobile home manufacturing to solar energy, I mean, you name it. Any other industry, they can't build their infrastructure because they're not competitive in the market. Not only do they need all the government subsidies that they get, which is just an absolute crime, but they need to have the rules relaxed. It's like a double whammy in how, like, this is just an old, dying industry that has no place in our society anymore. And, the fact that they're frying the planet. Oh, yeah, that. So I was honored to be invited to go up to Canada and really kind of visit ground zero of a lot of the organizing, international organizing around the issue. And it was Indigenous led. And it wasn't like this kind of a, like, here's our land that we're trying to reclaim, but just the paradigm shift did rock my world, right? That, like, changed everything. And I went to the healing walk, the Tar Sands healing walk in 2013, and it just, that blew me away, changed my life forever. The scale of the devastation, the heart and spirit of the Indigenous people who were standing firm on the land to which they belonged, despite all odds, the way they draw on a power larger than themselves, the way that people from all over the globe and many walks of life had come to the healing walk. The fact that it was a healing walk and not a protest. It was centered on healing the land, healing people's souls, because so many of the local Indigenous people work for industry because they have so thoroughly demolished the land on which they had a subsistence living that there's no other, there's no other way to not starve to death, is to work for industry. So demonizing the workers was not demonizing, it wasn't about demonizing industry. It wasn't demonizing anybody, it was healing. That was really powerful. That shaped my work going forward. And so, Standing Rock happened, and I visited Standing Rock a couple times very briefly, and just strictly at the invitation of Winona. I didn't go there of my own volition because I thought they don't need another white hippie, right? And I was actually, because I'm on the honor, no, I hadn't been on the honor board yet, but I was really super involved, working with honor before I joined the board, was at home doing a lot of, like, helping with the back end, because there was a lot of fundraising going on and having to, like, just deal with this. I mean, there was at one point where somebody organized a thing at the local, of course, Unitarian church. God, I love the Unitarians. For everybody that had visited Standing Rock, to come together and just sit in one room and be like, okay, can we process what we experienced and how we feel now, like, re-entering our, privileged white mainstream, albeit progressive bubble, but it's, a completely different world. And the only thing I had to say was just like, I went through this like 3-4 years ago when I went to the Tar Sands Healing Walk, and I didn't have a room full of people of other white people to process it with. Nobody I knew had anything like that, and I just was like, I'm really glad to be in a room with you all now because I feel like a lot less alone. Right? I mean, one of the things that really was so profoundly influential that happened at the Healing Walk was, the Healing Walk we walked for like 8 or 9 hours. It was a good long walk. We stopped to pray pretty frequently, but towards the end of the walk, the news came in that there was some kind of a petrochemical petroleum spill in the Athabasca River. The number that sticks in my mind was 50 miles, like a 50-mile long spill. Like it was gargantuan. And I just kept like flashing in my mind to what it would look like if the scale of devastation that I had seen at the tar sands had occurred in my home. My husband and I, the land on which we live is on a hill. It's on a saddle where we have drainage into 2 creeks, one side of our house versus the other. The creeks are Jackson and Fraser. Jackson Creek and Fraser Creek come together in a wetland called the Jackson-Fraser Wetland that's protected, which is nice. And then that flows into the Willamette River, feeds the Willamette River. And the Willamette River flows into the Columbia River, which flows into the Pacific Ocean. So I'm in the Columbia River Basin. That is my home watershed, which I share with everybody in the Columbia River Gorge, the Snake River drainage, all the way over to Missoula, Montana, where my family lives.
Where do you see this going? I mean, we went through DAPL, we had that experience at Standing Rock. The pipeline went through and spilled several months after they turned the faucets on. And so some people say, oh, we lost that fight, but I think most people who were there, and especially from the cultural perspective and this paradigm we're talking about, wouldn't call that
A loss. The first bit of hope that I've been feeling for a while was Jamie Pinkham's visit, and the fact that, from what I understand, he was very strongly moved by what he saw.
Jamie Pinkham, the head of
The
Army
acting
Corps.
Assistant Secretary of the Army Corps of Engineers. Yeah.
What would you tell people who are just learning about this right now? What can they do?
Contact Jamie Pinkham and tell him the Army Corps of Engineers needs to pull the fill removal permits and conduct a full environmental impact statement. Yep. Just like they did for Keystone XL. A federal environmental impact statement is needed, just like was done for Keystone XL. Yep. And they need to take into account climate impacts, just like they did on Keystone XL. So contact Jamie Pinkham.